Hello, my name's Aviva, and today I wanted to share with you my most disappointing and my least favorite books from 2021. So at the time that I'm filming this video, I have read just above 190 books. I'm really hoping I get to 200 before the end of the year. But my point is that I'm pretty sure 38 books to share with you. So I feel like that is a ton of books to go through, but at the same time, for 190 books, to only have a 40 that were really disappointing, I feel like is not the worst of, statistics, even though I'm horrible at math, so maybe that actually is. But basically, I wanted to run through all of the books that disappointed me for one reason or another. Because I have so many to go through though, I'm not going to be explaining what these books are about in detail. I'm just going to tell you what I didn't like about them and why. Also, this is in no particular order, like from least to favorite, favorite to least. I literally grabbed all of the books off of my shelf and I randomly piled them up next to me, and I'm just going from the top of the stack to the bottom sort of thing. I also wanted to say that if any of these books you enjoy and I didn't, I'm not trying to offend anybody. Everybody has their own taste in books, and for one reason it worked for you and for another reason it didn't work for me, and that is totally okay. So if you see some of your favorite books on this list, then I apologize, but also I just didn't like them. I'm not necessarily bashing them or your taste or anything like that. But first up, I wanted to share the Iron Face series by Julie Kagawa. I have heard really good things about these books, and it's really funny because I recently read the Addicted / Calloway Sister series, which I absolutely loved. And one of the characters, his name is Daisy, and they had mentioned at one point in the 10-book series that the Iron Face series by Julie Kagawa is actually her favorite book. And they kind of brought this series in and spoke about it for a minute and a half. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe she loves it, because I actually really didn't like it. But the reason why I think I didn't like it is because it was a little bit too middle grade for me. It was kind of being marketed as, if you enjoyed The Cruel Prince, then you might enjoy this series. It's a YA, fantasy, fairies, fae, everything like that, romance, wars. It had everything that I was looking for, except I feel like it was a little bit too young for me. And also the way that the story was being told, I felt like everything was being told to me instead of me experiencing it. The thing is that if I was 10 years younger, if I was 10 years old, 11 years old, and I was reading this series, I have a feeling I would have enjoyed it a lot more. So I think that I just picked it up at the wrong time in my life, but at the same time, I did pick it up this year and I really didn't enjoy it, but somehow I ended up reading all 4 books. Next, I wanted to share the Auntie Origin series by Amanda Hocking. So I was actually really excited about this series for a couple of years. I had heard that it was happening years ago. My sister told me about it, and I waited until all 3 books were completed so that I could binge the whole thing. This series is basically taking place in one of my all-time favorite fantasy world, in the world, the Trial series by Amanda Hocking, Switch, Torn, and Ascent. You could see it right behind me right here. It's basically one of the first fantasy books that I ever read, and my copies are literally falling apart. That is how many times I have read them. I'm pretty sure I'm up to 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere around there. That is how many times I've read Switch, Torn, and Ascent. And I even did a reread of it this year, and I finally got to the point where I know the story too well that I don't know if I'll ever be able to read them again, because I'm literally reading the pages and I'm I know exactly what's gonna happen, word for word. But my point is that I'm obsessed with that series and I absolutely love the universe. And this series, it takes place in that universe. And I was really hoping that it would feel similar, that I would love it as much as I loved Switch, Torn, and Ascend. And unfortunately, I really didn't like it. I felt like this was geared a little bit more towards the younger crowd than even Switch, Torn, and Ascend was. And these books came later. And one thing I loved about that series is that it had a ton of romance, but it also had a really good story, as well as a really cool world to be a part of. And in this series, there was a trickle of a romance, but it was so nothing in comparison to Switch, Torn, and Ascend. And I think that was one thing that really bothered me about this series. And then on top of it, I don't know, I just wasn't so into the actual story that we were following. It didn't hit as much as Switch, Torn, and Ascent hit for me, and therefore I found this series extremely disappointing. But I wanted to just say that if I read this at a different time of my life, if I read this the first time that I read Switch, Torn, and Ascend, I have a weird feeling I would have enjoyed it a lot more. It was just the wrong time in my life to pick this up. Next, I have Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. So I'm only holding up the first book because I only ever read the first book. I actually DNF'd this series after I finished this one, even though I wish that I DNF'd this book like 100 pages in, because I wasn't vibing with it right from the beginning, and I'm so bad at DNFing. I always waited out thinking that it's gonna get better, and in this instance, it definitely didn't. This is an insta-love, an angel and a devil falling in love sort of thing, and I was hoping that this would be a really good fantasy romance series, and I just wasn't a fan of the romance. So even though the entire fantasy world and the story behind everything was actually pretty interesting, I couldn't focus on it, and I didn't even care about it because the romance was just so horrible in my opinion that I couldn't see past it. It was also such a big part of the story that I'm just like, I don't know, I was annoyed the whole time. I'm really not into insta love or insta lust or anything like that, and therefore I really didn't like this one. Next, I have the second, third, and fourth book in the Ember and the Ashes series by Sabathir. So I read this at the beginning of the year, and I absolutely loved book one. Like literally couldn't put it down. Loved the story from beginning to end. Everything about it, I thought it was so unique, so different. I was like fully obsessed. So then I went and I binged the rest of the series, and I just wasn't a fan. Everything that happened at like the end of book two, like all of the twists and turns that it took, I was like, why did it have to go that way? And then book three kept happening that way, and then book four, I was like, okay, whatever, it was a fine ending. But like basically the rest of the series, I feel like it just took all of the turns that I didn't want it to take. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's bad, but I don't know, I thought that the romance aspect of it was too slow for me. Like it literally took 4 books for the one couple I was rooting for to get together, and there wasn't much of that to follow. And then the story in itself, everything bad that could have happened kind of happened. And I know that that's a reason why people like this series, but for me, it's like, I liked book one, and everything that bad that could have happened still happened, and yet I was somehow a fan. And then the rest of the series, I don't know. I didn't like it, and therefore it was pretty disappointing for me. Next, I have A Shadow in the Ember by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Oh my God, one of the most disappointing books for me from the year, mostly because I read From Blood and Ash this year, and I absolutely loved that series, and I was looking forward to this book for so long, and then I found it to be a huge disappointment. I actually did an entire reading vlog on this book. It was spoiler free, so I'm not really going to get into all the reasons why I really didn't like this book. So if you are interested, then I will leave the link to that video down below. You know, I didn't even do this on purpose, but I somehow started with like all of the fantasy books. Well, it was kind of mostly because it was really bothering me that all of the books that like sit right here, I had to pull off the shelf, and then it looked funny. So I was like, let me do them first so that I could put them back on the shelf right away, because, you know, my OCD wasn't able to handle it very well. But then I realized that I don't have that many more fantasy books to talk about. So I'm just quickly going to go through the rest of them, and then we're going to move on to, you know, all of my romances. But basically, Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab, also known as V.E. Schwab. So this is the second book in the, what was the series called? The Savage Song Duet. So I absolutely loved book one. I listened to both of these books, like half on audio, half reading them physically, and I really enjoyed book one. Like literally, I was like flying through it. I kept trying to listen to the audiobook because I was having a really fun time with it. And then I got to book two, and I was like, what the hell was this book? Like, I feel like I ended this book off with more questions than I went into it with. And I was just like, I felt that it was extremely pointless. And I almost kind of wish that I had only read The Savage Song, because I really did enjoy that book. And I somewhat wish that it could have just been a standalone. Like, I didn't really see a point in the second book. And I don't even remember particularly what bothered me, but I kind of have the, you know, recollection that I didn't get any information out of this book. And I read an entire book, and I was like, okay, but like, what about everything that we ended on book one? So I don't know, that's kind of what I remember feeling when I finished this book. But my point is that I really enjoyed book one. I very, very much loved it. And book two, I thought was a complete waste of time. Next, I have Chain of Gold and Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. I know so many people loved these books, but they were definitely my least favorite from the entire Shadowhunter world. So these were a disappointment, as well as one of my least favorite books from this year. So I thought that we were following way too many characters, and I thought that like the actual storyline, like the actual thing that was happening between the two main characters, Grace and James, I didn't like what was going on there. Like, I physically did not like the story. I don't like everything about it wasn't up my alley. And then the rest of the stuff that was going on, like plot wise, I was just like, I don't know, it's not as interesting as the other Shadowhunter books I read. And then pile on top of that the fact that we were following so many characters and my attention was being split into like 12 ways because I loved every single character, except there were just too many of them, and therefore we weren't getting enough of each of them. I don't know. I just thought that this was like a mess of a book. I know that they're like extremely big. What are they, like 800-900 pages a piece? I was just like, I don't know. I really enjoyed all of the other Shadowhunter books in the entire universe besides for these two. Next, I have A Deadly Education by Naomi Novak. I got halfway through this book and I wanted to DNF it so badly, but I couldn't decide if it was actually going to get better or not. So I asked Instagram and everybody was like, no, finish it, continue it, even if you have to skim it. So I skimmed it all the way to the end and it definitely didn't get better. This was one of my most unfavorited books of the year. Is that even a word? It was one of my least favorite books of the year, without a doubt. Whatever you want to say. My point is that I really didn't like this book. I thought that the idea for it was absolutely amazing and it was very well thought out, except it wasn't executed well at all. I thought that it was way too info dumpy. It had way too many flashbacks that were way too long. Like all of a sudden you'd be reading a scene and you're like smack in the middle of it. And then all of a sudden you get like a 5-page commentary of like something that happened in the past that I couldn't even realize why she was telling it to us right now in middle of like, you know, whatever we were in middle of. So, and then you would jump back and then I'd be like, okay, but what were we in middle of doing? And then I would like, it would take me forever to get back into the moment. And I really did not like everything about the writing style. I thought that the world was really cool, but I really couldn't get over the execution of it. Next up, I have the Song of Achilles. Oh my God. I know that so many people love this. This was one of the most hyped up books of this year, and I found it extremely disappointing. To be fair though, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know the actual story of what this was talking about. Like, I never read the Iliad. I don't know all of the Greek mythology stuff. Like, I literally didn't even know the actual information of the Trojan War. Like, I'm gonna blame my school's education for that. But my point is that I went into this book super blind of the actual storyline. And I think that is one of the main reasons why I didn't end up enjoying it. I kind of skimmed the entire middle of the book, and then I jumped to the end, and then I bawled my eyes out. So I definitely understand why people rave about this book, because it is definitely a tearjerker. Like, I wasn't even into the story, and yet I felt like my heart was ripped out at the end of it. But at the same time, if I actually knew what the story was about, I would have saw it coming, and therefore I think I would have enjoyed the entire journey a little bit more. But a lot of people said that like you could pick this book up without really having to know what it's a retelling of. So I did, and then I was super disappointed. And then the last fantasy book that I wanted to share with you is A Map of Days, which is the 4th book in the Miss Peregrines series. So I listened to the first 4 books on audiobook over like, I don't know, Halloween time-ish, like October, November, somewhere around there. And I really enjoyed the story of the first 3 books. I thought that it was so much fun. I thought that it was super unique. I really enjoyed listening to it on audiobook. I really have no complaints about the first 3 books. And then I got to book 4, and for some reason it fell flat for me. I wasn't into it anymore. I didn't really care for where the story went. I didn't think it was as intriguing as the first 3 books, and therefore I stopped listening to them after book 4. And I kind of wish that the series was only 3 books. Like, I feel like it would have been totally fine at just being a trilogy, but I did hear that the first 3 books came out whenever, and then it was like after the fact they decided to continue on with the story. So then they made like 4, 5, and 6, or maybe there's even a 7th. I don't even know. But my point is that I kind of wish it was just a trilogy. I didn't like book 4, so I ended up DNFing the series after that one. So now for all of the romances that ended up disappointing me this year. So first up, I have Second First Impressions by Sally Thorne. This is the same author as The Hating Game and 99% Mine. I absolutely loved The Hating Game. It was one of my favorite books from the year. So I looked up what else the author has written, and she had wrote Second First Impressions as well as 99% Mine. So I just like blindly bought them, and I actually ended up enjoying 99% Mine. It wasn't as good as The Hating Game, and I know that a lot of people like don't vibe with it, but I personally really enjoyed it. But then Second First Impressions was so not up my alley. The storyline is like you're following this like nerdy girl who works at a nursing home, and she's kind of like, I don't know, she acts like an old lady sort of thing. And then there's this guy that comes in that has long hair and he like has tattoos and a motorcycle sort of vibe thing going on, and they end up having a romance. And I just really didn't vibe with anything about this story. I didn't like the romance. I didn't like either one of the characters. I didn't like the setting of the book. It just, I don't know, nothing about it really clicked with me. And therefore it was extremely disappointing, because I know that Sally Thorne has it in her to make an amazing book because she wrote The Hating Game, and then she gives you this and I'm like, is it even the same author writing both of these books? Next, I have Tools of Engagement by Tessa Bailey. So I actually even put this book on like a 5-star prediction list at one point this year, because I heard so many people raving about Tessa Bailey this year. She came out with a couple of new books, like, I don't know, the summer book, like something about summer, and then window shopping, and like, I don't know, I've been seeing her name all around this year. And therefore I read this book because a lot of people said that this is one of her best books. And then I absolutely hated it. I really didn't like the writing style. I really didn't connect with the romance. There was nothing special about it for me. I mean, there were a couple of steamy scenes, but I don't even care for steamy scenes if I'm not connecting to the romance or the characters. So therefore, there was seriously nothing redeemable or rememberable. Is that even a word? Rememberable? Whatever. Either way, I just really didn't like this book, okay? Next, I have Simmerdown by Sarah Smith, which I thought was a recipe for like a really good book. Like everything about it, it just sounded like it was going to be an adorably cute rom-com. It was like an enemies to lovers, food truck business, rival people trying to take each other's customers. It was based in Maui. Like, I just thought it sounded like a great time. And then I read it and it had all of the elements of a great book, except it ended up being super cliche, kind of cringy at times. And I don't know, I just really didn't like it. I thought that it had a handful of good elements, but it didn't end up being executed in a unique or an interesting way for me. So I ended up being kind of disappointed by this one. Next, I have the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert. I read all 3 of these books and I seriously shouldn't have wasted my time. I have been hearing a lot about this series for a while now. Everybody seems to really enjoy it, be really obsessed with it, think that it's one of those like really good rom-coms that, you know, I don't know, have good tropes going on, everything like that. And I just didn't see it. It was probably because I absolutely hated the writing style. We were following a dual perspective from a third person's point of view, and therefore I was never able to figure out whose point of view we were following, especially because sometimes they would jump between the two, even in the same chapter. And therefore, I don't know, I was just like confused the whole time. And then the actual storyline, I didn't connect to it. Like, I seriously didn't care for any of the characters. I didn't relate to them at all. I didn't find there to be anything special from these books, and it actually is very sad because some people's favorite books of the year ended up being these books. Like, I saw these on a couple of people that I follow like favorites list, and now I kind of have to be a little bit more judgmental when I end up taking a recommendation from them, because if they really loved these books, I'm not sure how much our tastes align. And I do know that a ton of people love them. I feel like I'm in like the outskirts of the people who like, I'm one of the few who didn't end up liking it. But at the same time, like, I really don't see what was so amazing about these books, and I don't understand why it gets all the hype that it gets, basically. Next, I have the Bromance Book Club by Alyssa K. Adams. So this is the first book in a companion series, and I'm pretty sure there's like 4 out at the moment, but I kind of stopped reading it after the first book because I really didn't vibe with this. This is a second chance romance, which to start with isn't my favorite trope of all time. Like, I don't mind giving that trope a shot, but in general, I tend to stay away from it just because I'm not really a big fan of second chance romances. And then I didn't end up vibing with the writing style of this. I can't remember if it was a dual POV or if it was just like a third perspective. And I don't know, I just really didn't connect with the writing, and therefore I didn't connect with the characters. And then add on top of that a second chance romance. It was just a bundle of everything that I wasn't a hugest fan of mixed into one book. And therefore, you know, if you don't connect to a romance, then why would you enjoy a romance book? So therefore, I found this one really disappointing, especially because so many people hyped it up this year, last year. Like, for the past while, I've been seeing this book all over the place. That's why I wanted to read it. And then, I don't know, it fell super flat for me. Next up is Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. So I think I read this at the wrong time of my life. I think that if I would have picked this up when I was a teenager, I would have enjoyed it more, but I ended up DNFing it like literally halfway through. I just didn't connect with this book. I don't know what it was. Like, it had a cute storyline. Like, I thought that it sounded pretty intriguing, but then I feel like maybe was that it was a little bit more contemporary than it was romance heavy. And I heard that this was a really cute YA romance. And then, I don't know, I just didn't vibe with this one. Also, Love at First by Kate Claiborne. I kind of picked this book up on a whim. I didn't really see anybody talk about it or anything, but it was blurbed by Christina Lauren, and I am a big fan of Christina Lauren, so I thought that it was like, a safe bet to take a shot on this book, and then I ended up being super disappointed. It was a contemporary romance. I don't even fully remember what it was about, but I just did not like this book at all. I seriously should have DNF'd it at the 50, 60 page mark because I wasn't vibing with it right from the beginning, but I kept waiting it out thinking that, it was gonna turn around once we got deeper into the romance, things like that, and it didn't. Next, I have Gimme a Reason by A.K. Jackson. So I bought this book on a whim based off of one book talk recommendation that I saw. There was this thing going on, and it was a bunch of books that I really enjoyed, and then this book was smacked in the middle of it. So I'm like, you know what? It looks good based off of the cover, so let me get it. So I got it, and then I absolutely hated it. I did not vibe with the writing style. I thought that it was way too textured, way too trying too hard sort of vibe, basic down, trying to give off a vibe and just tell me the story sort of thing. But it was, I don't know, just the writing style totally turned me off from this. And then I was so not into it. I wasn't really connecting with the romance, the characters, that I ended up skipping to the back of the book, and I saw a huge spoiler, and I'm like, I don't even want to see how that spoiler is going to play out, so I'm DNFing it. Next up, I have Angry God by L.J. Shen. So this is the last book in the All Saints High series, which is also the spin-off series from the Sinner of Saints series. I absolutely loved the entire Sinner of Saints series. And then the All Saints High series was kind of half hit, half miss for me. I would have enjoyed book one more if I was more into bully romances, but it wasn't bad enough to make it onto this list. It was a personal preference for me that I thought that Pretty Reckless, the first book, was just a little bit too heavy on the bullying, but that's just on me. Book two, I absolutely loved. And then book three, I thought was such a fail, which was so disappointing because I absolutely love the parents of the person that was in this book because we met them in the Sinner of Saints series. And I was a huge fan of the guy in this book throughout the entire All Saints High series. And then we got to his book and it was an enemies to lovers, and I just didn't really like it. I can't even start to get into what it was that I didn't like, but I didn't like it. Next, I have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. After reading this book, I've decided that me and Emily Henry were parting ways. I tried Beach Read and I didn't think it was bad, but it wasn't my favorite of the year, especially based off of all the hype. And then I read this one and I so much didn't enjoy it for so many reasons that I've decided that people seem to love her books and hype it up, but I don't think they're gonna end up being for me. So you're following a dual timeline in this book, which right off the bat, I'm not the hugest fan of because I really don't like not knowing, especially when you're following two characters and they know what happened, but you don't, and you're left on the sideline and then you're waiting the whole book to find out what it was that happened. And then in this book particularly, once we got to the end and we found out what happened, I thought that it was extremely disappointing. It's that's what you're giving me for the catalyst of the story. It was so underwhelming. And then the entire journey to actually get there, I didn't enjoy either. There were too many time jumps. We were living too much in the past, and it's if I'm reading a romance, I want to see the future. I know that you guys have a history and this is somewhat of a second chance, but I'm not a big second chance person in general. I don't like that idea. And then in this book, it's we didn't really get that much of a now. It was more of I don't know. It was just, I feel like I could talk about this for a long time. I'm going to stop myself here. My point is that I really didn't enjoy this book, and especially based off of the hype, I ended up finding it extremely disappointing. And then kind of the same exact thing goes for Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is the first Christina Lauren book that I came across that I absolutely hated. So this is also a dual timeline, a second chance romance sort of thing, and The thing that happened at the end of the book, there is a trigger warning in it that I kind of felt was coming like in the first quarter of the book. Like I was kind of like, oh my God, I'm getting a vibe of what it's gonna end up being, like the thing that we don't know about, but both characters know about sort of thing. And then when it came, I was right. And therefore it kind of ruined the entire book for me. Besides for not enjoying the thing that actually happened at the end of the book, I also thought that the entire situation surrounding it was messed up on so many levels. And while I understand the past time love story, I actually thought that, the love story that was in the past, timeline that we were following was really adorable and really cute and like very like heartwarming and everything. I didn't care for the now timeline romance. Like everything that was happening with them in the now was like, whatever, you're basing it all off of like the past. And like, that's one thing with second chance romances. Like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of second chance romances. This one definitely disappointed me. I hated the catalyst of the book. And basically, I know that this is super hyped, but seriously, guys, whatever. Next up, I have The Goal and The Dare, which The Goal is the last book in the Off-Campus series, and The Dare is the last book in the Briar U series, which is a spin-off series for the Off-Campus series. So both of these books are the last books in their respective series, and I found them to be the most disappointing, which is really sad because it's like you're finishing up a series and then you end up hating the last book in it. It was just like, I don't know, I felt like all the series they went downhill. Like the first books in the series were my favorite, and then the second books, they were good but not the best, and then it's like it kind of all trickled down, and then the last books in both series ended up being my least favorite. So The Goal, the one from the Off-Campus, is a pregnancy trope, and I hate pregnancy tropes. And then on top of that, there was nothing special about this pregnancy trope. It was literally like the most classic pregnancy trope you can ever ask for, and therefore I really didn't like it. Even though I was a fan of the main guy, I thought that he was great. His story just wasn't. And then The Dare, was it a fake dating? I can't even remember because it was that forgettable. I really didn't care for the last book. I thought that it just, I don't know, it didn't do it for me. And therefore, unfortunately, the last two books in these series, I just didn't like. And the next four books that I'm going to mention, I am mushing all together because they are all extremely similar. And at the same time, I didn't like them all for the same exact reasons. So for hockey romances, we have Shameless King by Maya Hughes. We have The Perfect First by Maya Hughes. We have Playing for Keeps by Kendall Ryan. And then we have Pucked by Helena Hunting. So I read all four of these books, which are all the first books in companion series. I was trying to find more books like the Off-Campus series, which is a college hockey romance that I really enjoyed, even though I hated the last books from both of the series. But it's fine. My point is that I was looking for some more sports romances, some more hockey romances that would give off the vibe of, the Off-Campus series. And I came across these four. A lot of people recommended them to me, and I just didn't like them. I personally thought that the two books by Maya Hughes, The Perfect First and then Shameless King, were extremely forgettable and very mediocre. I can't even remember what these two books were about. And I usually can sit and think and be like, okay, now I remember it, now that I have to sit here and think about it. And I'm literally sitting here and thinking about it, and I cannot differentiate what happened in either one of these books between the two of them. And they were just so mediocre to the point of like, if you're looking for something like Off-Campus, just reread Off-Campus. Don't waste your time with these. They're just a worse version of them. I mean, that's just my own opinion, but that's how I felt. And then, Playing for Keeps and Pucked, I both found to be a little bit too heavy on the steam and a little bit too basic on the plot line. And I don't mind steam, I love steam, but you gotta give me a good plot line and a good build up to therefore, let me enjoy the steam sort of thing. Like that's just what I need to enjoy the really steamy moments. And because it was so basic on the plot line, and both of these books like started off with like a one night stand sort of thing that was like, it wasn't even like a Fades of Black. It's like within the first 30 pages, you got like a 6-page sex scene, and it's like, but I'm not even attached to the characters yet. So like, it's not doing anything for me, So whatever. Anyway, I didn't really like these books. I know that a lot of people like them. And honestly, if you are a fan of really steamy books and you're not so picky on like, a heavy plot line with tension and angst and everything like that, I actually think you would enjoy these two books. But personally, they just didn't do it for me. Next, I have Twisted Love by Anna Hong. So this was pretty hyped up this year. I saw a lot of people raving about it, saying that they really did enjoy it, and I liked it, but it was also extremely disappointing for me. I kind of found the plotline to be on the verge of ridiculous, especially knowing that book 2 in the series is about a princess and a bodyguard. Like, I don't know. I'm not even gonna like try bashing this too badly, but I don't know. I thought that the storylines were a little bit over the top and it was a little bit trying too hard. And at points I found it like slightly cringy. Like there was a moment in this book when she was hanging out with all of her friends and she wanted to get the guy to like show off some emotions. So they're like gonna play this emotions game. And I'm like, oh my God, are you guys like 5 years old? And then the actual plot line of what was going on, it was just a little bit too intense for me. And I didn't think that the story really needed it. Like the romance aspect in itself was kind of good. Like I really did enjoy the alpha maleness of this guy, and like it was a brother's best friend, and like I liked some of it. Like the steam was really good, and it's like I was connecting to the characters just enough to like read the whole book, but then the plot line was like, I don't know, it was too over the top for me that I don't plan to ever reread this book, and I am returning the second book because I kind of bought both of them on a whim thinking that they were going to be good based off of the hype, and I really didn't like it. So I am even getting rid of book 2. I've decided I'm not going to bother with it because, I mean, a princess and a bodyguard, like, whatever. And then the last book that I'm going to share with you is Ruthless Creatures by J.T. Geisinger. So this is the most recent book that I read that had disappointed me. I know that the year isn't yet over, and I have a small chance of reading another book that I'm going to wish I was able to add into this video, but you know, I'm making it a little bit too early, and therefore, you know, we might miss out on a book or two. But basically, this is the last one that I read before filming this video that I very much didn't like. So I've heard really good things about this series in general. It is a 3-book companion series, and it's like a mafia romance with like alpha males, really steamy, really good stuff like that. And I got 77 pages in before deciding to DNF it. I really wasn't connecting to the characters. I really didn't care for either of them. The storyline was like to me, and I was kind of like seeing through it. Like I saw where it was going to go, and I literally didn't like it so much that I put it down and went to work for the day instead of keeping on reading this. Like I didn't like it so much that it literally pushed me to work, which is good because I got my work done, but bad because I really didn't like this book so much. So I spoke to a ton of people, and I am not the only one that didn't end up liking it, even though there were so many people who did like it. And the reasons why they liked it was because they didn't really care that it was insta-lusty, because it was extremely insta-lusty, and that was one of the reasons why it turned me off right away. But like, some people that doesn't bother them. And then also the steam in it was supposedly really good, but I didn't even get there. I was at 77 pages and I didn't really get to anything super steamy. So I don't know if that's true or not, but my point is that some people liked this, but then people who were a little bit pickier, that had more similar taste in books to me, basically said that they DNF'd it too and they didn't like it. So I will be returning the second and the third book in this series so that I can go and buy something better. But anyway, that is all of my most disappointing reads of this year. I know that I shared a lot with you, and I probably could have cut some out, but at the end of the day, I'm not really good at condensing, and therefore I wanted to share everything that I just really didn't like. So I am curious to know if you have read any of these books before, if you didn't enjoy the ones that I mentioned, or did you maybe enjoy some books that I ended up bashing in this video? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also, let me know what your least favorite book of the year was, because, you know, if I have it on my list, I want to make sure not to read it, you know? But anyway, if you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not currently subscribed to my channel, please subscribe, because tomorrow I will be doing my almost favorite books of this year. I'm almost done Bookmas. It has been a really fun ride. If you're not caught up, then I'm going to make sure that the Bookmas playlist is linked in the description below. I've been putting out a video every single day for the month of December. And now that we are in the last week of December, I'm doing all of my least favorites and my favorite books of the year. So tomorrow is my almost favorite. So make sure to come back. But anyway, thank you for watching, and until next time, enjoy reading.